It's my pleasure to welcome you to our second talk of the day, which is an exploration of new arts and cultural institutions across the African continent. We have three amazing speakers. These are people who I've actually gotten to know over Zoom for about a year and a half now, and this is our very first time all coming together and meeting here. And I wanted to first introduce you all to them because they are just such amazing, amazing people and leaders who you absolutely have to know. So with us today are three visionary leaders who are all, the thing that they share in common is that they've either built or rebuilt a cultural institution from the ground up. And cultural institutions that represent a range of different types of organizations, from museums to archives to cultural centers, but they all engage the visual arts. So to my right is Paul Ninson. Paul is a filmmaker and a photographer. He's also the founder of the Dikan Center in Accra, Ghana. The Dikan Center is Africa's largest photography library, and it just opened last year. In the middle is Wanjiru Koinange. Please put your hands together. Thank you. Wanjiru Koinange is an award-winning bestseller writer from Nairobi, Kenya. She's also the co-founder of the book Bunk. And she describes the mission of the book Bunk as an institution that builds the palaces for the people. They restore iconic public libraries in Nairobi. Put your hands together for Wanjiru, please. And last but not least is Seun Oduwole. He is often called the radical architect. And he is the project director and principal architect of the John Randle Center for Yoruba History and Culture in Lagos, Nigeria. Please welcome all our speakers. And thank you very much for being here, everybody. So the three of us were all together last night. We were at Zeitz Mocha's opening of Mary Evans' new exhibition called Guilt. Was anybody else there? Yeah, a few other people. So we were all together, and at one point we had the opportunity to meet Mary. And Mary said to us, with tears in her eyes, "This is the first time in my life that I have held an exhibition on the African continent, on African soil." And we all took that in because it was like, wow. Here's an institution on African soil that is able to have her exhibition. And I think we all looked at each other because we're involved in building institutions, and we're in the business of institution making, which is something all of our three speakers have been able to do. So the first question we wanted to ask them, because they're very passionate about each of their institutions, the first question we have for you all is, what do you love most about the spaces that you spend time in every day, that you're building, and that you're making accessible for audiences here in Africa? So Seun, why don't we start with you first?
Hello, everyone. I think what I love about the space that we created is that it's unapologetic. It's unapologetically Yoruba. It's unapologetically Nigerian, African, if you want to say that. I'm sure everyone here has met at least one Nigerian. And the one thing you'll know about us is we're not quiet. We don't do understated. We're very colorful. We're very proud. We're very dynamic. And I think when we started out, one of the things that we wanted to do was make sure that we created a space that reflected that energy. Most of the museums that were built in Nigeria were built sort of from 1957 onwards, and they were based on a Western model. And they just felt quite alien, right? And you had objects which have a meaning, which were put behind a glass case without very much context, or with very little context. So for us here, we wanted to create a space or a series of spaces that centered not just the culture, or not just the objects, but the culture, which is the reason why the objects were made, and the people who made them in typical sort of Yoruba Nigerian fashion. You know, a space that's just completely immersive. You go in and you get lost either as a group or as an individual. So I think that's it for me. You come in there and you just feel proud. You know, people have come in and just felt proud that this sort of space exists.
Yeah, it's an amazing space to visit. And as someone who grew up in Lagos in the 80s, the only museum I remember visiting as a child was the National Museum, which ironically sits exactly across the street from this new development, and it's quite a contrast.
Behind the trees. Well hidden.
It's quite a contrast to see and really, really exciting. So Wanjiru, over to you now.
Thank you, Charlotte. So the thing I love the most about the Macmillan Memorial Library and Book Bunk, and I'll explain the relationship shortly, is its history, which is also the most problematic thing about it. So to give you all some context, the Macmillan Memorial Library was built in 1931. It is Kenya's oldest. It's Nairobi's oldest and Kenya's second oldest. And for the first 32 years of this library's life, Black people were not allowed in it. And it's only 1962, on the cusp of independence in Kenya, that then the laws changed and it was handed over to the city county, but only really in terms of the paperwork. So the collections, the statues, the art. When you walk into the Macmillan Memorial Library today, it feels like you're stepping into 1930 Nairobi. So enter 2017. So it would be the black and white image.
The next one.
The next one. There we go. So enter 2017, my co-founder Angela Washuka and I decide to bully, convince, coerce the government to hand these buildings over to us, this one specifically, so we could see what we could do with it. And the first thing that made sense was to tear it all down and start from the top, right? Because it's a kind of monument to a really painful past. But the more we began to interact with the space and see the people who are still using it, the building doesn't say, welcome, come, you're all welcome. Still today, it's very much barricaded and not very welcoming, but people still use it. And then a few months later, we discovered it has 2 more branches in other parts of the city that were a lot more connected to the community because of their location. So suddenly, this problematic history, this problematic history alongside this really connected other 2 buildings made this project and this organization, it kind of shaped our mission as restoring public libraries and making them palaces for the people and making sure that we can look at this building. Instead of tearing it all down and starting again, let's examine this history. Let's see the way that the collection of this library described us as Kenyans in this country and look at it and stare at it and feel the way that it feels to re-engage with colonization and racism in new ways. And that is always giving us a new lens to write our history and to provide other people a means to come into the library and contribute to their version of the history. And it's the work that I know we'll be doing well beyond the renovation of the building, because that kind of culture work, that takes time and effort and care. I'll stop there for now.
Thank you. That is beautiful, Wanjiru. So today we're sitting in a room, and the name of our room is the Vasco da Gama Room, which is not an African name. So because you mentioned the exercise of decolonization, I was wondering, as you've gone about rebuilding the libraries, have there been any opportunities for name changes?
That is one of my favorite questions. So the Macmillan Memorial Library is 90 years old. The other 2 branches are simply named after the area they're in: Kaloleni Library, Eastlands Library. But I think that to rename this library now would be putting a Band-Aid on a problem. We haven't changed the building. You have to change the building before you can change the name. So once we've remodeled the architecture, changed what the building means to Kenyans, and this we do exclusively through art. We provide arts education for free to people who want it, mostly children. And then we begin to kind of change what the philosophy of the building is. So once that work is done, then we can ask Kenyans, what do you want the library to be called, and name it that. But until that happens, it still is the Macmillan Memorial Library.
Okay, we look forward to the process. So the next one up, Paul, tell us what Dikan means, firstly, because we're talking about names, and then what you love most about your space.
Thank you so much. I'm Paul. So Dikan in our local dialect means take the lead. And I specifically picked that name because, it's not about me. is the idea that Africans can take the lead to solve their own problems. So I named it in such a way that people will be inspired to, I don't like complaining. I like to solve problems. I like to build. So that's the meaning of the name. And one thing I love about our space is, this is our temporary space. We're looking forward to build our own space, like a big place in the next property. But for me, it's a sense of home. The two buildings are old buildings where we renovated, old homes where we renovated. So the library itself is the living room, the biggest living room, and the library is divided into two, where we have African collection, or African books and African American books, and the rest. So we have other places like Story Lab, and we have a huge compound, where people come in and just sit and relax. And also we have a lot of students coming in, and we have studios and other places as well. But what's really inspired me with the space and I love about it is like when people come there, you could hear, especially the library, you could hear people say, wow. And with that, it's kind of like people are really take in all the books and all the places where we've built. And literally, I renovated the place and built some of the parts with inspiration from the palace in my hometown. My grandparents were traditional rulers, and the palace was a place where we used to hang out, and a sense of place where we all celebrate, mourn, we tell stories. And most of the times, growing up, it was more of oral history. So I literally renovate the place and looking forward to build our own place in such a place. The courtyard is a place where all photographers, storytellers hang out in a Friday evening, and it's such a beautiful, and to have that sense of community around the space is what I really love about the space.
Thank you. So you mentioned that you're there on Friday.
Yeah.
Every time I call you, you're in the space. And so I've often wondered, do you actually live in this space? And when do you go home? Which hold there for a second, because it leads to my next question. This is a question, by the way, that I took from a dear friend of mine, and she's her name is Esther Arma, and she's also based in Accra, and she loves asking this question. And the question is, describe your relationship to your space or your organization. Is it a beautiful romance, a bad breakup? Are you in the process of getting a divorce? Give us a sense of what it's like to work and build.
So yes, I mean, I'm a photographer and I'm a filmmaker as well, and I've never worked a full-time job before in my life, and I've always been a freelance. So I've been at the place since I moved back from New York to Ghana, and I'm always there. If I'm not traveling, I'm always there, because I truly want to build a place where the Paul Ninson of 5 years ago, who was struggling to become a photographer, and a place where people really love to. So currently we open, we don't open on Sunday, but people are really pushing us to open on Sundays, because we averaging Christmas, we're averaging like 300 people a day. And people are just coming there. And on Sundays, on Saturdays, you can sense that people are not photographers or filmmakers, but they just want to be there, and it turns into a conversation and a sense of community. And your next question, should I answer? Or I should move it on?
Why don't we move on to Wanjiru?
Yes.
Okay, is this working now?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. I would call the relationship a throuple, actually. That's what I'm going to call it.
Next slide.
So none of the above. It is a polyamorous relationship between the Nairobi County government, Book Bunk, and the spaces that we, and I guess the spaces become the children of the relationship. And I say this because when we signed this agreement, when Book Bunk signed the agreement with the Nairobi County, it never happened with our sector before. I mean, it had happened for larger infrastructure projects, roads and hospitals and schools, but never for libraries, because they're like, libraries? Like, you want libraries? And we saw the vision, and we had to sell. It took us about 2 years to sell the vision to them. So that was 2 years of us dating and convincing the county to settle down with us. And when it happened, it became very clear that, at least to me, and I think to the leadership of Book Bunk, that government might not always know what to do with cultural institutions, and those are some of the most precious things we have in our countries. And it's a really big thing to say, we don't know, let's find somebody who can help us. And that's exactly what happened. And also showing people what they don't know, because the vision that we had for Book Bunk was so crystal clear, and that we had to communicate this to the county in a way that made them see that essentially we're doing your work for you, but we're also doing your work for you in a way that centers the users of the library. So I think it's a really experimental, first of its kind, and essentially really, really simple relationship, because it has the public good at its core. All we want to do is build palaces for the people, places where people of Nairobi can get every single thing they need. If you want to learn how to do your taxes, come to the library. Want to learn how to play the guitar? Come to the library. Just want to go on a date? I love the panel before. I'm talking about how kids are going on dates at the Zeitsmoker. That's happening at the libraries. 2 weeks ago, the team was just like, oh my God, Shiro, you'd never believe it. Like, we saw on the cameras, kids are coming on dates. I'm like, that's wonderful. That is wonderful because it's free. And I think that's the kind of juice of this relationship.
So I had the chance to visit Book Bunk last year, and one of the things I remembered was they've painted the men's bathrooms hot pink, and the ladies' bathrooms are blue. So I think they're also changing gender paradigms as well. Wanjiru, I also wanted you to just speak about how you engage the visual arts through the work that the libraries are doing.
Sure. So it's in the remodeling of the libraries. What we do before we even start the architecture work is we have conversations and we ask people, what do you want? And people told us many things over the span of the first 18 months. They want extended hours, they want Wi-Fi, they want clean toilets, but they also want spaces to explore the art. So if you walk into any of the 2 libraries that we restored during the pandemic, everywhere you look, you will see either something beautiful or something green. And that just changed the kind of energy of the building, because when you walk into a beautiful space, you kind of want to do better. You want to just be a better person. You want to make better decisions. And often with public spaces, that is not always the experience. You walk into a public space and you're like, oh my God, I have to get my passport. Oh my God, I have to engage with a public servant. And we really, really want to shift that, and we're doing that through the art. So we are very intentional about where we get art from. We do call-outs at least once a year for artists to put their art on the walls of the library, and we pay for this. Because unfortunately, in underserved parts of most countries, people who live there are so used to getting asked what they want, but no one comes back to deliver. And when we see kids who told us what they wanted 3 years ago walk into the library now and be like, can I still come in? It's free? Is it really for me? That is the joy of my heart. Yeah.
Thank you. Seun.
Hi.
Hi. So how's your relationship with the John Randle Center for Yoruba History and Culture?
Complicated. Extremely complicated. It's I won't call it love-hate, but it's love and sometimes do not like at all. First of all, it's my client is the Lagos State government, so it's funded by the government. So that in itself is tricky. Can you go back 2 slides, please? Yes, here. There, yes. But most of the time, when people ask me about it, I say it's also my escape. You know, it's like my childhood brought to life. I remember being maybe 6, 7 years old, going to the National Museum across the road and being incredibly underwhelmed. And I also remember going to other museums, British Museum especially, and some others, 9, 10 years old, and seeing, walking through and just lots of glass, lots of objects, and then seeing the Africa section with everything behind sort of glass and little placards and thinking, So this big, huge museum with lots of rooms, and then they've just got this little corner where they've put these tribal masks, and just thinking, just underwhelmed as well. And so I think it just got parked somewhere to the back of my mind. And then in 2016, when the opportunity to get involved in this project came up, I remember going to the office excited and saying, guys, we've got a chance here. And I've got an office full of about 10 people, and they're mostly under 30. So they look at me, a bit different. And they looked at me like, oh, here we go again. What does he want to do this time? Sort of thing. So I said, look, we've got to we've got a chance here to create a museum space. But I also had my own thoughts of what museum spaces were and what they represented and what they didn't represent, and how, in my opinion, they didn't center the culture. There's a whole conversation about restitution and decolonization and return, but nobody talks about the culture and the people who have made the culture, right? And then we've already spoken about Nigerians and Yoruba people, and I thought, okay, there's a chance here to do something special, right? That maybe looks at this typology again and creates a space that actually feels, like home. And growing up as well, my granddad was he was an academic, a scholar, so he had lots of books, fantasy books in his library, Grimm's fairy tales, Andersen's fairy tales, Hansel and Gretel, and I grew up on that content. And then my grandmother was a trader. She was like a full Yoruba trader, loud, brash, unapologetic. She was like a proper Yoruba woman. And so she used to tell us bedtime stories about Yoruba mythologies, Shango, Oya, Oshun, Orunmila. And in my head, I thought, okay, how do I sort of combine both worlds, or how do I show that both worlds aren't really that much different? So if you take mythologies, for example, if you take Thor, who's the god of thunder, right? Then we've got Shango, who's also the god of thunder, and they're both the same. One wears tights, the other one wears sort of robe around his waist, but their mythologies, their stories are the same. But most people have never heard of Shango, or if they have, it's in a sort of very negative context. But with Thor, people, the Avengers, this and that. So I thought, okay, how can we take those stories, right? Stories that I grew up with and put them in context, ground them in context, right? These objects, they're not objects. They had a life, they had a purpose, whether it was spiritual, whether it was religious, whether it was day-to-day functions. Wood-carved doors were used to tell histories. How can we take these objects and put them back into context? And then how do we go back and retell our stories in a way that centers the people, centers the culture, protects the heritage, makes people proud, of their space, and also just sort of shows that even though we've evolved over time, our narratives and our culture still remains the same, and has evolved with time, and how do we create a space to do that at scale? So you feel like, most people use international references, whether it's the Guggenheim, MoMA, the Louvre. You could feel like you're walking into that sort of space, but the subject matter is unapologetically Yoruba. You walk into the space and it's a soundscape. Every single area has a sound experience. When we were designing the space with our exhibition designers, we used Ralph Applebaum Associates, who are amazing. And the first few meetings, I said, I need sound everywhere. Like, I need the place loud, noisy, just traffic noise, everything, market noise, everything. And they were like, yeah, Seun, museums don't really work like that. I'm like, well, yeah, your museums don't work. Have you guys been to Lagos? Like, do you understand? So we arranged a trip, brought them down to Lagos, took them to the market, took them to the Oba's palace. The Oba dressed them in traditional robes. The Obas tried to marry two of the ladies that came on the trip. It was just chaos. And so on the way back, they were like, okay, we get it. That's what we need to do. We need to sort of recreate that, the color, the noise, the chaos, the fun, the energy, that you get, the smell. So it's a completely immersive experience. You walk into the space and you're just hit visually with color. You can hear orikis. Oriki is a Yoruba praise song. So you can hear orikis, you can hear market noise, you can hear market traders, you can hear palace praise singers, you hear Fela Kuti in a corner here, there's Wizkid in another corner there's an animation going on in the back. So it just takes you through a journey of the Yoruba story from the past into the present, and into the future as well. It's a space that has stories that I grew up listening to, understanding, and then I wanted to create a space that my kids could come to and listen to those stories as well, and their kids, and on and on and on. Sorry, I think I took 6 minutes or something there.
That's okay. We can tell that you're you said a breakup, or?
I said, well,
that doesn't sound like a breakup to me.
I said love, hate, and escape. Yeah.
Love, hate. Okay.
Or dislike, casual.
So, well, since we've heard from our panelists, and this is a conversation, we want to make this a dynamic space, I thought I'd take a minute to just ask if there's somebody in the audience who has a question or a comment they'd like to share. We'll just go with one or two, and then we'll jump back into the conversation. If you do, please raise your hand.
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. And feel free to say your name, where you're from.
Hi, my name is Noncedo or Veronica. I'm from South Africa. I'm from Cape Town, but I'm from Durban. Okay, so my question is, okay, before I ask a question, please guys, don't judge me, don't be personal. Please use your reasoning part of the brain to listen to my question. Here's the deal. I'm glad that there are libraries created somewhere, and I'm very frustrated I don't see any South African guy there. It frustrates me because I'm a South African. So here's the thing about the libraries. Sometimes they're very, okay, not always, they're good in giving kids, especially, the history and understanding of where we come from and what is happening, because some of the things in the system are missing at this moment. So the library sometimes bridges that gap. So my question / suggestion or something is, there are parts in the system which were good previously in instilling discipline in us as kids that made us who we are today, but they've been removed because they've been applied, I can say so, like maybe punishment or something. So is there any way in the libraries that you can replace that in a form of a way that when a child goes through that information, in him, he builds a discipline of doing what we could do because we're scared of being scolded or even beaten? Because for me, for instance, at school, I got A's, not because maybe I think everybody's clever, but I was scared of the teacher beating me and yelling at me. I let him give this teacher whatever he needs to get rid of him from me. That's the reason. But I didn't know at that moment the knowledge I was gaining was also building me, but I was running away from him. But the A's and B's I got, it was because I was afraid of him. The discipline I had not to steal, not to lie, not to hurt another person was because I was afraid of being punished. That's the result. That's extrinsic motivation. So now these days, because some of the certain things have been removed, so a child has to be like self-motivated to do things. At home, you can't beat them. Unfortunately, from mine, I pinch them. They spin. I don't have time for that. I'm going to kill them, but they mess with me. But at school, they can't do that. They can't touch them. So you are the only part in the side of the parents to have some discipline, to take the toys from the guys. Doesn't it motivate the child to be a good thing. So I have to get closer, personal, and get in the physical. Pinch them. So do you do something in the libraries to replace that for the child to come out motivated to change his attitude and behavior and cooperate with the teachers at school and the parents at home?
Thank you so much for the passionate question. Since it has to do with libraries, Wanjiru, would you like to start?
Sure. So I can't speak to the lack of South African representation. I'll leave that one for you. But to answer your question, so we don't discipline kids at our library, but we prefer to give the children the information they need to make the right choices. I truly believe that discipline starts at home. We can support what's happening at home, but kids are definitely not getting punished at our libraries. And I think I'll just leave it there.
I don't want to discipline them. I want to give them something that's going to replace.
So I guess that in that case, the information that they need to make the good choices is how we're contributing to that.
Thank you, Wanjiru. This touches on the subject of youth engagement. And so the three of you have thought very carefully about how to engage young audiences through the work that you do. So I was wondering if you could touch on that. What is it like to build experiences and to bring young people into your spaces?
So for us, I've always wanted to build a place for younger people, the next generation. So if even the question about romance is like, I love the place. It's the place I love to hang out often. And if I love the place and the young people comes there, can you switch to, can you please, the next one? Yeah, so for example, we have a gallery. We are the first photo gallery in Ghana. We are the first photo library in Ghana. And you can sense that the kids love to come there. We have literacy program for young generations for 18 and 10. And we have 72 schools that come to the space every Thursday and Friday to use the space. So we have Story Lab, we have the library, we have the gallery, we have the compound. They just hang out and we develop programs, and we use archives, we use the library books, and I think majority of them love the the Black collection session because these are books which people have never seen before. And for me, that's the reason why I started Dikan. When I was in New York, I saw so many books and archives of Ghana in New York Public Library I've never seen, and it was not part of my curriculum. And so for me, that was a pivotal moment. I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go back to Ghana, leave New York, and go build a place where the context of our educational program is African context only. That is the goal. You know, we have developed curriculums on African visual history only. We developing books on African history only. And the kids love it because, again, for us, we want to be able to influence education system in Ghana and even in Africa, you know, because these education systems were designed years ago. You know, Ghana gained independence in 1957, but the education system has never been changed. The curriculum has never been changed for a long year. So to tell you a story, right, in school, I was learning about religious and moral education. And there's a session which is traditional religion. And I was learning features of a witch. It's in my curriculum in Ghana. And features of a witch means a woman who likes meat and is black. It's in my education system. So for me, this is what I want to start from the younger generation for them to see. You know, sometimes the history is written by who? But for us, it's like, how can we use visual education, you know, pictures, videos to influence the system? And again, our gallery is we're not commercial gallery. What we do is that right now we created an exhibition on Independence Day on 6th March. And the exhibition has a curriculum and things where we give to the kids to come in and answer questions, and we engage with them. And it's so surprising that I do it. Like now my career as a photographer, I think that is out of the window. I love the kids when they come there, and I share my experience with them. I share these archives we research in and the books we have. We have books from 1945, 1942, signed by the then governor of Gold Coast. And for us, it's like, yeah, he published the book, but the pictures in this are Ghanaian pictures and African pictures. Funny enough, we have more South African books more than Ghanaian books. I don't know how I collected them, but for me, the joy is, and somebody asked me a question about racism in South Africa, and she saw it in the book. And I was like, okay, let me research and come back to you. But now I'm in South Africa, I think I have the answer.
Wow.
Okay. Well, I think, you remember the last question I said that my space is a sort of escape, and it's a trip back to nostalgia. It's a nostalgia trip for me. I think growing up, I probably would have been classed as one of those kids who needed a lot of discipline. And I think a lot of times children are misunderstood, right? They have a lot of energy. They have a lot of curiosity. I think as an architect, we're very right-brained, and we are very curious people. And one of the things we say in the office is you have to be as curious as a little child in order to be able to create magic. I think it was Nietzsche that said one must have a bit of chaos and curiosity in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. You know, so throughout the whole design experience here, we always try to look at it through the eyes of the first person user, the eyes of that 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old boy, girl, who comes into this space, and we just want to capture their imagination, first with the exhibition and the experience, and then secondly with the library that we have, which now sort of goes into detail on some of the exhibition that they've seen above. And I think it's, like Paul said, there's a lot of our education in the past has been sort of very Western focused, and kids go through some of that a bit confused, not really understanding, a bit lost in their identity, and I think there's a certain kind of interaction you get with a child that is fully engaged when something becomes very clear, to them. There's an area that we've got in the exhibition which is called the storytelling area, and what it is it's a tree that we made, and we put little benches. If you go back, please.
To the first one.
Yeah. Yes, here. When I was growing up, there was this program on TV called Tales by Moonlight, and what it was very simply was as a reenactment of a storytelling where a grown man sits under a tree, puts little kids in a circle, and tells a story. And that story at the end normally has some sort of proverb, some sort of wisdom, some sort of meaning, some sort of lesson, for the kids. And we created that area here. And we've had scores of kids come in. They come in there, and the first thing they do is they gravitate there. They want to sit on the tree, right? And in that radiogram next to me, for those of you who are old enough to recognize a radiogram, what we did was we took this man who's about 80-something years old now. We put him in the studio and recorded about half a dozen of those stories in Yoruba and in English. Now, a lot of people don't speak Yoruba, but one of the things we did in the exhibition, we made Yoruba the primary language. So even the sound, the audio that comes from the speakers is in Yoruba first, and then it switches to English. All the text is in Yoruba first, and then it switches into English. So even when the stories start, they start in Yoruba, and the kids are just captivated, just by the sheer voice and the acoustics, and then it switches to English, and you can just see the little sort of cogs going in their brains, and they're going, sort of thing. And we start with this, because history, information, knowledge was passed down orally, right, through generations. So this was where we wanted to start them with before they go into all the AI, high-tech, touchscreen panels and everything else. But just sitting in this area, you can see how they get lost just with the lighting, with the mood, with the tree, with the storytelling, with the narrative, right? And there's always one kid who wants to be sort of too clever, have a funny comment, sort of thing, and he's loud and he's running around. And by the time they go through the exhibition, they come around the back. They start asking questions like, okay, can we come back again? Can we come with our sleeping bags? Can we come with our PlayStations? Can we do the weekend? Or, is there anywhere else we can go? And then I take them down to where the library will be and say, okay, we'll have a library here. You can come in here with sockets, PlayStation. You can put your sleeping bag in the corner. You can be here as long as you want, as long as your parents allow you to. And it's interesting because the experience normally takes about an hour, but you can see how some kids, from the first step in to when they get out, you can see how their whole sort of mindset, they're just calmer. They're a lot calmer. They're a lot more engaged, invested in what they've seen and want to actually learn more, know more, and find out how they can come back,
So we'll take another question. I see a hand back there in the green shirt. In the back, green shirt.
Thank you for the information. I might have come in late. My name is Khuma. I'm from South Africa. I'll say, from everywhere pretty much. But I want to ask, I think I could pose this question to all of you. What were key factors in the research blueprint that you guys used from the conception of or realizing of this vision that you guys had from the beginning to the implementation of creating it to the manifestation? What were key factors that you guys used in the blueprint that you guys used to create what you guys have created? Because we see of course now we see the vision has become what it is and is beautiful, but what was it that you guys maintained to actually implement this vision?
Wanjiru, do you want to start?
That's a great question. Thank you. So as Charlotte mentioned in my introduction, I'm a writer, and I actually have a very special relationship with Cape Town because I wrote my first book in the libraries of Cape Town. And then a few years later, I went back to Nairobi to start the next phase of my life, and I looked around and I'm just like, hang on, where am I going to write my next book? I don't want to have to keep going elsewhere to create work in these spaces that are literally built as palaces of literature. And that was the kind of aha moment. And then after that, there was a lot of research, a lot of conversations, a lot of kind of assessing the creative landscape of Nairobi and of Kenya and seeing how we can make these spaces serve artists in the most diverse ways possible. Because it's very hopeful to think that we will get to a place where we have a really beautiful network of galleries and museums and cinemas. And I think that day will come, but in the meantime, spaces like libraries, like museums, like community centers have to kind of do all of the work. People remain at the center of everything that we do. So even if we have an idea, it's selfish, and rightfully so, for me to say I want to build spaces for writers to write. But that space will be even more transformational to the community if it can serve as many people as possible. It's amazing the number of things the libraries that we're working on do. We're running food programs, we're teaching arts education, which for the last 20-something years has been absent from the curriculum in Kenya. And true palaces serve. And I think the blueprint will change and evolve as often as it needs to continue to serve the people that the libraries are there for.
Thank you. I'll be honest with you, I didn't have any blueprint when I started. You know, it was more of things that pissed me off, right? I was in New York, and here I am where pictures and videos of Kwame Nkrumah are in New York Public Library and in my school in New York, rather than being accessible in Ghana, right? So for me, that alone was something was pissing me off so bad. And being in a class where my work was not accepted. You know, most of the times when I showed my work from Ghana or Africa, and, you know, the comment that came around, and I was like, yeah, I understand, this is American school. I'm going to go back and build my own school, which is for Africans, and build curriculums, build spaces where the younger self of Ninson 5 years ago, where I sold my iPhone to buy a camera, can be. You know, and again, if you come to this side of the world, right, South Africa, you know, I have my very good friend here who used to run photo market. And again, I never got a visa to come here, you know, and, you know, that war has never been open to everybody. So for me, my blueprint is, and now it's still happening, right? If I see something which is not right, I want to solve it. I want to take the lead and solve it. You know, can you imagine that Dikan is the first and the only photo library on the continent, right? It's like, what, like, you know, the first photo gallery in Ghana. And to think about that, I really want to solve problems. So as time goes on, the blueprints keep on evolving, and I will continue to solve problems in the visual art, visual storytelling space and evolve. And as you were saying, the palace, we call our place Palace of Storytelling. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're doing so much. You know, there's 3 schools around us. We have 17 official schools we've adapted. That's different from the 72 schools that come around. And again, we are neighbors to Amako Boafo, who is a painter, and he also has an institution there. So we are currently doing a lot rather than just the library, the story. And again, we have Story Lab where the community, the 16 schools come around and use the space. So I think the blueprint is the problem solving, is the process, right? Listening to people, what they want, what they need, what is the space, what is the problem. And you can think about it in Ghana currently, all our archives, majority of our archives is in BBC because definitely they were the people who used to rule us, right? And it's like, how can these things be accessible to us? Right? I don't want the archives back. I just want to be accessible, you know, to use it for education purposes. We've been working with some of the archives of photographers who have been in Ghana. And again, they are all in Paris. They are all in Europe. And we wrote to them as like, can you just give us the digital low resolution for us to use it in the classroom to teach? It's like, nope. You need to, we are the agents of this person and that. So for us, that is what we're trying to solve and have these dialogue with BBC and say, Getty Images and all these people and say, can Africans have access to the stories you told about us and be able to use them in the classroom or use them for exhibition. It's so hard to have these things back at home and be able to share with people. So, yeah.
Yeah, so, Paul spoke about some of the challenges that cultural institutions face. And I wanted to address an earlier question from an audience member about why we have no South African institutions on this panel. So we all are actually colleagues, and we meet about once a month online to have discussions amongst ourselves, including South African colleagues, 2 of whom are in this room today, no, 3 actually, about how we can advance cultural institutions on the continent. And so when I was putting together the panel, I asked our South African colleagues, who should we invite to be a part of this discussion? And everyone said, well, why don't we have examples from other parts of the continent? Because this is very much about learning amongst ourselves. So often our models, as Seun, Wanjiru, and Paul have described, come from the West. And what we want to do is cultivate learning amongst ourselves, including South Africans. So we very much have South African voices in our group and in the work that we do. Go ahead, Seun.
You want me to take? Okay. I had different reasons for doing what I did on this project. One, I think history was taken out of the school curriculum sometime in the early 2000s in Nigeria. So you had generations of kids growing up not understanding their identity, their origins, where they're from, or why their country is called what it is, right? That was the first one. And then secondly, I've lived in Lagos a long time. I've lived other places as well. There's this whole conversation about architecture in Nigeria, architecture in Africa, the quality, this whole conversation about restitution, return, don't return. We can't return it to you because you don't have the sort of places of the right caliber, quality to receive these objects back, even though they belong to you first. So I just wanted to shut some people up, man, So it was a combination of that. Why can't we create these spaces? Why does this 7-year-old boy or girl have to go through the same museum experience that I went through in 1984? You know what I mean? In 2000 and whatever it is. So it was, and I mean, it was stressful. We started this thing in 2016. It took us six plus years to do it. We went through some of the experiences you went through as well. For example, we have an object list of about 1,000 objects and images. 99% of those images we had to find from Western institutions and libraries because they just weren't kept locally. So that even, that was a big light bulb moment. But then on the flip side, a lot of the objects that we found, 99% of them we found locally. So even that started to shed light on this whole restitution discussion, because it became about the quality of the space, the quality of the conservation, preservation, lighting, sound of these objects, and the quality of expertise, locally. So we went through a whole journey of now sitting down honestly and saying, okay, how can we create the best possible space that we can? Because it's not about me, the architect, or it's not about my academic team. And we had Harvard scholars, Cambridge scholars, we had scholars from like all the named blue chip institutions, right? We had the guys who were like the #1 exhibition designers. Like, we had the big dogs. But it wasn't about them. It wasn't about us. It was about the end user experience, the first user experience. How does someone come in and feel that this space belongs to them, that feels like what they see, what they experience resonates with them in a way that they've never felt before, whether they're museum experts or whether they're, a first-person user. And so, I mean, that whole experience was difficult because trying to get, I think the biggest issue was, erasing that cynicism, because a lot of people say, oh, this is Nigeria, you can't build this, it doesn't work. This isn't Dubai, this isn't the West. So we got a lot of that, and we kind of took the punches and said, okay, no problem. We'll see when we're done. And thankfully, a lot of those people who didn't believe at the start are now sending me sort of like WhatsApp passages. Like I woke up this morning to, must have been like 300 words, man. You know, like I saw this woman maybe 5-6 years ago, and I told her, oh, we're trying to build this museum, and she looked at me and scoffed. And so this morning I got a message saying, you know what, you know, my life's work as an artist has been fulfilled because of what you've done here. And
I saw that message, I think.
I showed it to you,
Yes.
right? Yeah, so you see, I'm not lying. She read it. You know, and it's humbling. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, because she's an artist, right? And then now there's a space that sort of celebrates people like her first and allows other people to consume her work in a context that responds to the work that she's created. So I was quite glad about that. So I just sent her a nice thank you heart emoji message.
So Madame Koyo has a question or a comment. Could we please pass the mic? She's holding her hand up in the back.
Thank you, Charlotte. First of all, I really want to commend my colleagues, brothers and sisters on the panel for the amazing achievement that you've, how do you say it in English, that you've accomplished by establishing the institutions and the organizations that you have. I think that anyone who is invested in deconstructing the colonial damage that the continent has endured, understands how important arts organizations and the building of arts organizations are in ways that really transform the people who initiate those, as well as the people who go through those organizations. So really, I don't think that there are any words that can really translate what I feel about that. And those of you who know a little bit of my work know how much I'm passionate about deconstructing the damage that we endured one institution at a time. So to Paul, to Wanjiru, to Seun, and particularly you, Seun, achieving such a marriage in Lagos with the public and local government and a private idea and a private initiative, it's beyond any possibility of achievements in our countries, as we all know how the structures are completely disrupted, distorted, corrupted, and in many ways. So I really just want to thank you for that. Thank you for existing. Thank you for being there. And thank you for doing the hard work that you're doing. I also wanted to respond to the sister earlier. I mean, Charlotte, you've been very gracious. And people know that I look gracious, but I'm not gracious. So I really believe that South Africa needs to learn more about Africa. And we are talking from a place that is emblematic about the ways in which our cultures have been damaged and deconstructed. So it is so important to bring Africa to Cape Town, right? In ways that we can reclaim the space of Africa in Cape Town, particularly in Cape Town. Because for some reason, I mean, we all know about the features and the really the deep impact of settler colonies, and we are in the one of the most kind of difficult, the most, perverted settler colonies of all settlers' colonies, which started in this region. So I think that it is really very important to understand that, because I still believe that all the work that our colleagues on the panel are doing is really part of rewriting ourselves against the wrong writing that has been done for so many centuries. So it is really, I like to say that we need to make Cape Town African again, right? In ways that really reclaims not only the territory, but also reclaims the imaginary of not only of South Africa, but of the continent in itself. So that said, I have one question, which is I am very concerned with the idea of anger. Anger in ways that as an energy, but anger also as a motive in institutional work, in artistic work, in political work, in any forms that we can address it. And I think that there is this conception of a lot of black people, be them African or diasporic, that we are so subjected to the projected idea of Africans or black people being angry and not allowed to be angry, whereas we have so many reasons to be angry. I like to understand how you, if that anger and that motive is at all in your ideas or in your thinking, in your institutional kind of outlook to deal with within the organization itself, but also as a material of deconstruction and as a material of reclaiming an African personality. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's really about anger, because I think that there is so much anger, and rightful anger, that is not dealt with institutionally, artistically, politically, in many ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Koyo. Beautifully said. Yeah. Who?
I can start. Wow, that's a very smart question and a tough one too. Yes, I'll be honest with you. My experience in US made me an angry man. It took me a long time and therapy to get over such experience of racism and suppression, and I that was the first time. When you're in Ghana, you're in Africa, right? Okay, part of Africa. You you kind of, the idea of being black, right, and be subjected to all the blackness on your skin color is not there, right? So when I went to New York, that is when I first experienced what blackness really meant. And my first experience was a terrible one. My classmate told me he was too white to shake my hand. And that was my first 18 September. I'll never forget that day. And I didn't understand. I was like, you stupid. Like, I'm a Ghanaian. I'm in one of the best schools in the world in terms of photography. I don't care about what you do. And for months, right, those are things affected me. So I was angry in that sense of why all the resources are here. Right, the stories which were told about me, why about my people, why are they here? So in the beginning, I'll be honest with you, it was much more of led by anger, but then it motivated me to do the things I have to do. If those experiences were not lived in New York, I don't think that I'll be too much of working so hard to bring about 30,000 books to Ghana. Right, to bring those resources to Ghana. And for me now, in the institution, I believe 100% that Dikan is a platform, right? Whether black or white, whether the system is, we need to collaborate with people, we need to bring people in. But for me, in any circumstances where there's anger or there's any sort of things, I want to retool it in such a way to help people, to solve problems. So I think that now, I would say that I'm on a path of solving problems rather than, frustrating those things much. But again, you experience so much challenges as a cultural leader that you can avoid it, Sometimes I don't understand why other institutions on the other side are so difficult to collaborate with us, right? Why is it that so hard that all I want is the resources, the materials you have to be able to use them in education. So Dikan is a visual education organization. We 100% believe in visuals. We 100% believe in education. So I think that now, as a leader and an executive director of the institution, I've lived and I'm still learning. I'm a baby in this. And I think as time goes on, I still learn from people and be able to learn from my colleagues as well